Have you ever felt the sharp sting of laughter directed at your dreams? That moment when you share your vision, only to have it shattered by mockery? Today I want to tell you a story that might forever change how you respond to the voices that try to hold you back. Imagine standing at the bottom of a deep, dark well. The walls are slick with moss. The climb seems impossible. And every time you look up, you can barely see the circle of light above. This is where our story begins, not with a person, but with a small green frog. In a forest pond that had slowly dried up during a particularly hot summer, a colony of frogs found themselves trapped in an abandoned well. The water was barely enough to keep them alive, and the steep, slippery walls made escape seem impossible. Among these frogs was one who couldn't hear. Since birth, this frog had lived in silence, never knowing the sound of rainfall or the chorus of evening croaks. But what others saw as a disability, this frog experienced as focus. While others spent their days lamenting their fate, the deaf frog studied the walls, calculating, planning, preparing. One morning, as the first light pierced the top of the well, the deaf frog announced through gestures that it would attempt to climb out. The other frogs gathered around, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and pity. If you were watching closely, you would have seen the subtle head shakes, the dismissive glances, the silent communication that said, "Impossible." Have you ever wondered how your life might change if you couldn't hear the doubts of others? Take a moment to consider that before I continue with our story. As the deaf frog began its ascent, the other frogs started to call out, "It's too high. The walls are too slippery. No frog has ever made it out. You're wasting your energy. You'll fall and hurt yourself." The chorus of discouragement grew louder with each inch the frog climbed. But here's the crucial part of our story. The deaf frog couldn't hear a single word. To this determined amphibian, the wide-open mouths and animated gestures of the frogs below looked like encouragement, like they were cheering it on. When the climbing frog slipped and fell back several feet, the colony below croaked even louder. "See? We told you so. It's hopeless. Come back down before you get seriously hurt." But the deaf frog, seeing only their energetic movements, interpreted their warnings as enthusiastic support. "They believe in me," thought the frog. And with renewed determination, it started climbing again. If you're facing obstacles in your own life right now, I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. What's the one challenge you're currently trying to overcome? Hour after hour, the deaf frog climbed, slipped, and climbed again. Its legs burned with exhaustion, its tiny feet bloody from gripping the rough stone. With each attempt, it learned. This crack provides good support. That moss patch is too slippery. This route is more direct than that one. Meanwhile, the chorus of doubters gradually fell silent. Some lost interest and returned to their daily complaints. Others watched in astonishment as the deaf frog continued its seemingly impossible journey, now halfway up the well. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows down into the well, something remarkable happened. The deaf frog, with one final tremendous leap, reached the edge of the well and pulled itself out into the world above. Free at last, it peered back down at its colony, still trapped below, still convinced that escape was impossible. What the other frogs failed to understand was that the deaf frog's greatest strength wasn't in its legs or its cleverness. It was in its inability to hear their doubts. The same walls surrounded all of them, but only one frog saw those walls as a challenge rather than a prison. This story isn't really about a frog, is it? It's about you and me, and the voices we choose to listen to as we pursue our dreams. The well represents any difficult situation you find yourself in. The walls are the obstacles you face. And the colony of doubting frogs, they represent all the voices, including sometimes our own. that tell us what we cannot do. Here's what most people misunderstand about achievement. The difference between those who succeed and those who remain stuck often isn't ability, but rather the ability to tune out discouragement. Your limitations are rarely as fixed as others claim they are. When people tell you something isn't possible, what they're really saying is that they couldn't do it. Or worse, they're afraid you'll prove that their own limitations were self-imposed all along. Let me offer you 3 practical insights from our deaf frog's journey that you can apply starting today. First, recognize that not all feedback deserves your attention. Learn to distinguish between constructive guidance and limiting beliefs disguised as advice. When someone says, "You can't," ask yourself, is this person speaking from experience or fear? Their perspective might tell you more about their limitations than your potential. Consider creating mental volume controls for the different voices in your life, turning up those that empower you and turning down those that don't. Second, reframe obstacles as data, not destiny. Each time the frog fell, it gathered information about what didn't work. Your setbacks are not failures. They're feedback mechanisms teaching you how to succeed next time. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this teaching me?" Keep a small journal of lessons learned from obstacles, and you'll start seeing patterns that can guide your next attempts. Finally, understand that persistence isn't just about trying the same thing repeatedly. It's about trying with increasing intelligence. The deaf frog didn't just mindlessly jump at the same spot. It adjusted its approach based on what it learned. Your persistence must be paired with adaptation. When facing your own well walls, make each attempt a smarter version of the last. The most profound truth in our story isn't that the frog escaped. It's that the others could have too. The well never changed. Only the belief about what was possible did. Think about the wells in your own life right now. What dreams have you abandoned because someone told you they were impossible? What goals have you set aside because the climb seemed too steep? Perhaps it's time to embrace a certain selective deafness to the chorus of doubts. Remember, every great achievement in human history began as an impossibility in someone else's mind. The first person to run a 4-minute mile was told it would cause their heart to explode. The Wright brothers were mocked for believing humans could fly. Every innovation, every breakthrough, every triumph began with someone who was deaf to the limitations others accepted as truth. Your journey out of whatever well you are in begins with a simple choice. Will you listen to the chorus telling you what you cannot do? Or will you focus so intently on the climb that their voices fade into irrelevance? The light at the top of your well is waiting. The question isn't whether the climb is possible. Our deaf frog proved that it is. The question is whether you'll give yourself permission to try, to fail, to learn, and to eventually succeed against all voices that said you couldn't. If this story resonated with you, I hope you will subscribe and share it with someone who might be sitting at the bottom of their own well right now. Sometimes all it takes is one story, one perspective shift, to help someone see that the limitations around them are more permeable than they appear. What well are you climbing out of today?